Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Diary of CMO. It's been a minute, but I'm glad that we're back now. I'm excited for all of the things that we're going to do this year. A number of announcements coming up for what the Diary of a CMO is going to look like for the rest of the year. But that aside, we get into all of that later. I'm excited about who I have on today. I've been told I spent a bit too much introducing people, but I don't have a choice because, like, these are amazing people, But I'm just going to keep this short and sweet. I have with me the Chief Marketing Officer, Ackermans. Her name is Bronwyn Pretorius. I think of her when I read a bio. I think of her as as a queen of retail. Like it's incredible, like the experience that you had across that. I mean, I know you've been in financial services and maybe a few other things as well, but just to share of experience you had in this space. But we'll get into it. Thank you for joining me on this episode, Bronwyn.
Thank you for having me today. I'm really, really excited to chat to you today.
Fantastic, fantastic. For those who are meeting you for the first time, how would you like to introduce yourself to them?
I'm Bronwyn Pretorius, born and bred in Cape Town. I'm a mother of two amazing kids, wife to my amazing husband of 13 years, and a proud CMO and marketer. I absolutely love what I do. And as you've said, retail's in my blood. So very excited to chat to you today.
Interesting. I think I read somewhere that 13 years, that's amazing, by the way. 13 years, that's beautiful. This is my 10th year.
Oh,
And now,
congratulations.
thank you, thank you. I have a brief, an unsolicited brief, that in terms of how, what we're going to do for like this milestone of 10 years. So maybe I'll reach out to you for a few tips at some point off the
Reach out to
record.
my husband.
Oh man, I think I read somewhere, and just before I get into that, I think I'd like to get your take on, when it comes to like family, because yours, you talked about your husband, your kids, and I think I also read somewhere about, Cape Town and how that sort of city has shaped you. Can you talk about that briefly? How family and where you're from has shaped you?
So I'm originally from Cape Town, born and bred. I'm what, from a demographic point of view, would be called a colored female. So I grew up in a predominantly colored community, quite a bit of poverty in the community that I grew up in, a lot of gangsterism, you could call it that. But my father was definitely my North Star. Despite all of his, let's say, obstacles that he experienced through life, I mean, his mother was a domestic worker, so my granny was a domestic worker. He was raised in the church, he raised us in the church. And so Cape Town, my dad, really raised me in a way where anything is possible, no matter where you come from. We're such a diverse community in Cape Town, from different walks of life, and affording me opportunities to go to different schools where I saw diversity firsthand, and the opportunities that were afforded to me. So I think Cape Town definitely shaped how I think about the world and how beautiful, and the people in Cape Town are really just amazing individuals. I know in Joburg people might say that we're a little bit cliquey. I think we're cliquey because we love each other. We love our little communities that we've created. And so my family definitely shaped me from my dad's point of view. And then meeting my husband when I was about 19 years old, I'm 40 now. So I've known him for 21 years. He is the driving force in our family. He is such an amazing man and such a supportive husband, because being able to have a career that I do, I'm definitely not your average stay-at-home mom who I respect immensely because they have a huge job. But they are definitely not domestic duties a part of my role as Bronwyn Pretorius currently. So definitely huge support, and Cape Town has shaped how I think about the world. And my dad has been a North Star driving the success that I think I can definitely attribute to him today.
It's my dilemma, Bronwyn. Let me tell you what my dilemma is. My dilemma
Tell me.
is I enjoy these kinds of conversations. To hear you talk about the role that your father played and how you kind of look up to him in the way you were spoken about it. Obviously, that is my dream, and I think I speak for every other responsible father out there. That is the dream of a father, that your kids can speak of you in that way. Back to my dilemma. My dilemma is I could talk about these kinds of things for hours and not touch anything on marketing leadership. This is, and maybe there's something there. Maybe I should. I don't know. I'll explore that maybe sometime soon. But I'm always very. It puts a big, I'm always very excited to hear things like these about fathers specifically. I mean, I know moms play a huge role as well, but within the context in Africa specifically as well, to hear when you speak of when people speak of their parents in their, this way, it just it excites me, So anyway, let me real.
Just to make you feel comfortable, it makes me, it's something I can speak about for hours as well. My dad really, like, living in an impoverished community, coming from where he came from, having to leave school at a very, very young age, not completing high school at all, coming from the environments that he's come from. The resilience that that generation have is next to none. We can learn so much from that generation, and father figures are so important in the raising of kids, and moms are obviously as important, but dads
Yeah,
teach a woman how to respect themselves and the kind of man that they should want to look for in a partner one day. And so he's given me so much and more. I can only be grateful.
amazing, amazing. Don't worry, Bronwyn. We'll set up a new podcast where we will talk about things like this and just, and just swoon on things like this. But let's get into marketing for the sake of our
Yeah,
audience. I
yeah.
know that, Ackermans has won a couple of awards, within, the children's and children's wear category, or even the broader category. And I guess the first question I wanted to ask you is, in the context of 2026, as the economic realities continue to set in for a lot of markets, and the challenges that come with that, how do you move from a value retailer, value quote unquote, to being a brand that is more sort of like feels the soul? And I think I read that somewhere as well, feels the soul, and also represent the fabric of the markets that you operate in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes complete sense. Authenticity and connecting with your customer is extremely important. When I joined Ackermans, let me just say this is an amazing organization that I work for. I, when you join a company and you're like, I finally feel home. This is how I felt when I joined Ackermans. So Ackermans, the foundation of Ackermans is all about its customer, and we've even named our customer. So it's Siamazi, which is Zulu for we know her. She's a predominantly a woman. She's a mom, and so we know her. And every time we speak about our customer, we don't say customer here. We say Siamazi. What does Siamazi think about this? Have we spoken to Siamazi? So it's a really beautiful thing that's ingrained into this organization, that every decision that we make is all about Siamazi. And so we've never gone away from being a value driven organization, because value, if you understand the concept behind value, the equation as we call it, with us as Ackermans, is about good quality clothing at great prices. The combination of those two is something that no other brand in South Africa can compete with right now. They can try, they can definitely try, but the combination of our heritage and being around for over 100 years is ingrained in all of the data that we have, all of the information we have about her, and it's about understanding how she's evolved. So always being on the cusp of Siamazi, who she is, who her family is, her dynamics, and how she evolves over time, because who she was 100 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago is not who she is necessarily today. So yeah, let me start with Siamazi. That that is the woman that we cater to and that we think about all of the time.
Interesting. And I guess that's the that's the way you kind of remain relevant to that sort of fabric of the market, because that's the same. You're talking to that person who I guess a lot of women within the market as well can identify with. Like that's me. If they had to play out the biography of who this person is, like they would say that's me. That's really interesting. You talked about the customer data that you've kind of gathered about this person, Ziamazi,
Siamazi. Siamazi.
Siamazi.
Like
Okay,
Siamazi. Yeah.
okay, okay. All right. Forgive me, my South African audience. So, Um, Customer data, you spoke about that, in passing just now. And I wanted to ask you that, what do you think that CMOs within the sort of like retail space and maybe even broader consumer goods, but retail specifically, what do you think they get wrong, when it comes to harnessing, this customer data, to really, really cater to the sort of like the core needs or the opportunities, if I put it that way, that exist within the data. What do you think that retail CMOs are still not getting right? The one key thing they're still not getting right when it comes to harnessing the power of customer data.
I think customer data is fantastic, but it's not the be all and end all of understanding your customer. So there are numbers that can tell a specific story, and those numbers are really, really important to lead you down a path. But you can definitely find opposing numbers in that same few of numbers that can tell a contradictory story. What's really important is matching up your customer data with being in the field. From a retail perspective, you can gather as much as information as you want. But as an example, yesterday I was in stores with my executive team and we visited 6 stores. That kind of understanding the conversations that you have, the experience that you have, and even just watching your customers, you can't get through numbers all the time. So you need to find a way to balance the two, but also match up the two in order to make decisions. It's not just taking your customer data, sitting in an office and making decisions, because then you don't truly understand who the customer is. Immersing yourself into your customer's experience, or in our case, Siamazi's daily life, with the combination of customer data is really important. So that's the kind of advice I would give when it comes to data.
Interesting. Interesting. I want to talk about the Checkers Extra Savings. I think it's a campaign that you led. True.
So it's a loyalty program that I was the marketing lead, and Checkers Extra Savings is the biggest loyalty program in South Africa right now. Yes, I worked at Shoprite Group of Companies for over 11 years, and it was a very big part of my career. Let's call it that.
Interesting. Interesting, because I'd read that somewhere, and it's again, like you said, it's being quoted as one of South Africa's most successful sort of program. What made it work? At least in the time that you were there, what do you think made it work?
So what I believe made it work, and I do belong to the Extra Savings Club, as you put it. I think what made it work is because they definitely understood what the consumer needed before the consumer needed it, and they're offering real value. And what I mean by real value is prior to Checkers Extra Savings launching, there were companies and retailers that were offering points, or they were offering tiered programs. But what Checkers Extra Savings really understood was instant gratification on products that you need, products that you want on those specific products. So not tiering you in a way that's going to add barriers in order for you to be able to get those savings, actual savings that matter to you in your pocket, which I think is something that every South African, no matter what SEM you are, needs and wants and cares about. So I think it's in its simplest form, understanding that's what your customer wants and offering that to your customer and not adding any hurdles or barriers to be able to get that.
Sorry, just before I go to the next question, let me kind of double down on that. So, and again, and this doesn't have to be in the context of the said company, and it's that how do you know what the customer wants before the customer knows what they want? Because you said that like real quick, and in my mind, I'm thinking, hold on, like of course I know that there are companies, there are case studies and people who've done this really successfully, but just from your perspective, how do you think, how do you do that? Sometimes the same, we every player in the market most of the time has access to the same research work, if you get what I
Exactly.
mean. So that's what I'm thinking, like, but for those who are able to identify those needs in that sense, how do you know what the customer wants before the customer is even aware, or what the customer needs before the customer even is even aware that they need it? How do you do that?
So I always think back to the quotes with Henry Ford, where I think he said, if we had to ask our consumers what they wanted, they would have said faster horses, right? And so it's about understanding the needs, but I think it's a little bit of luck in there as well, a little bit of creative genius in there as well, where certain individuals in the world have a knack to be able to say, I understand the need, but I'm taking a different route to that need because there are 3 or 4 or 5 ways I could answer this problem that the consumer is having. But hey, let's try this one, you know? And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. So I think it's a little bit of luck that is involved in there as well.
That's a tough thing to admit for a CMO,
It
the
is.
concept
It
the
is luck.
concept of luck. Do you get what I mean? And I appreciate go on, go on.
Sorry, say a life is a little bit of luck, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not tough for me to admit that sometimes a little bit of luck, it's a little bit of gut. Not every decision that a marketer makes is going to be marketing science every single time.
True.
Sometimes you just know better. You walk into a room and as an example, let's take an event or an activation. You walk into a room or an activation or an event and you just know that this is completely the wrong positioning for where it's supposed to be. There might be lots of customers walking past, but if I'm looking across the way, I'm seeing, oh my word, there's a cellular store on that side, and on that side it's a home store. And so maybe that's a high traffic area, or maybe it's in a food court area, but is it right for your brand, right? And so there's a little bit of gut feeling, and then there's a little bit of luck that comes into play because we try things all the time as marketers, and sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you have crazy ideas and it doesn't land. And sometimes people don't hear about it so that they think that certain brands just do amazing things all the time. But there's a little bit of luck, I think, in every position, in every business, not only in marketing, but it's definitely a part of. I'm very lucky in a sense in my world.
Interesting. So I like that you added guts to it, because I think that sometimes I could definitely speak for, a while on working with, CMOs or business leaders or CEOs who I can tell that the challenge here is just courage, you know, just the
Mm.
courage to do this, like, all of the questions have been answered, all of the doubt has been addressed, all of the, the data, the projections, everything is saying go. But sometimes it's just the guts for the CMO or the CEO or the business leader to say, you know what, regardless of what happens, this is what we're going to do. And I definitely appreciate you touching on that. And I'm going to use that to, get into the next question about when you were taking on this role that you're in now. And I think that it's one of the toughest jobs for a specific reason. When you have a brand that's been around for that long, it becomes it can be very tricky, when you come in as a chief marketing officer to try to sort of orchestrate some kind of, reset or some kind of, strategy that maybe wasn't conventional within the system for the brand, so I think where I'm going with this is when you took on this role, what was your sort of like your North Star? Maybe not in the immediate when you took it on, but I'm sure like in the first 100 days or whatever, you could definitely tell yourself, this is my North Star for this role. And how has that North Star help you navigate this role successfully?
Coming back to understanding your consumer, that was really important for me. Understanding who she is, what is her life like, but then also asking questions around, is this really her? How did we gather this information? Is this information accurate? Is it relevant? And does it speak to who she is today? And those are the kinds of questions. It's also about being courageous. You spoke about courage. Asking the questions because you don't know, right? I came in completely fresh. I'd never worked in the apparel space before. I'd worked in retail, financial services, and banking before, but never in the apparel space. So I had to learn the business, the industry. There was a lot for me to learn. So I was just coming in and asking questions. So my North Star was, I don't know. I need your help. I need to understand more. Help me understand. And by coming in with that approach, people were more open to helping me, but also asking tough questions. Because yes, there would have been people that have been around for quite a long time because this business has been around for 100 years. So we have people that have been around for quite a bit of time. And what happens in that sense is individuals start getting into certain routines and they start doing certain things because this is how we've always done things. So being challenged in how they've always done things could also be an approach where not necessarily appreciated. So it's all about your approach, right? Understanding that I don't understand, asking a lot of questions, and my North Star always going back to, okay, so tell me more about CMRZ. Tell me more about this consumer that you speak of. Tell me more about how you gathered this data. Is this statement actually true about her? How do you know the statement is true? And asking questions in a way that's inviting debate and conversation rather than being critical. That was really important for me when I first entered into this organization.
Fantastic. I think when every time I have conversations about retail, I'm always curious to you know to get how brands or whoever I'm talking to, how they are navigating this sort of like offline and online intersection. I think that what you find in some cases, maybe with direct to consumer brands, is the digital part is always very great, but then the offline isn't doing as great, or then the offline isn't necessarily for revenue or for sales, but more for like customer experience. Even though that hits the fan when we now start making very strict business decisions. And when you talk to legacy businesses like Ackermans, you then realize that there's a very strong offline, side of the business, but then the digital side might not be as great. I'm by no means saying that's the case for Ackermans. No, I'm just drawing that sort of parallel between what I see with some DTC, i.e., more sort of contemporary DTC brands versus legacy, brands. And I'm saying all of this to ask, how do you, in your role, how do you navigate that intersection to create a truly seamless experience for CMRT?
Look at you, CMRZ, saying it
I know you see
beautifully.
what I did there, right?
I think it's really important that you understand what your brand represents. And our brand represents value, but our brand is also about bringing value to life. And how we bring value to life is to our CMRZ with good products, amazing products at great quality and really great prices. But then it's also about bringing joy to our kids. So the kids often are the ones that come along with CMRZ to the stores. And so understanding if the world is of a parent in the store, it's that same parent that's going online. So when you go into a store and you go into our online experience, which we offer online shopping, we offer click and collect. So we do offer an online offering as well. There needs to be a golden thread, and you need to be able to feel like this is Ackermans. This feels like Ackermans. It doesn't feel like I'm completely separating from a brand. The brand needs to have certain fundamentals, a framework of fundamentals that you use, but they just are channel specific. So it might look different in a store, but it serves the same purpose for the brand in a store, and it serves the same purpose for the brand online. And understanding your consumer, she might go into a store and she might shop, but she may have started browsing 3 days ago. So realizing when the customer journey actually starts is not as regimented as it used to be. It's actually quite fluid. They may have gone into the store, seen something, bought something, and also then gone online afterwards to check something out, or 3-4 days before the time gone online and checked it out, and then purchased in store 3 days later. So understanding it's a little bit fluid, right? And so this whole world around digital, it's understanding that your consumer needs to experience you in a way that you want to deliver to your consumer, no matter what the channel is. And it goes back to not only from a digital, online, offline perspective, but even within channels. So within digital channels, from a social media perspective, how you show up on Facebook, your consumer is slightly different to Facebook, to Instagram, to TikTok. But the same message needs to land. They need to understand your brand and the essence of who your brand is, no matter what part of the journey they're experiencing.
I completely get you. I think that sometimes, and I think that the key word, like you also alluded to, is that experience, is that it feels the same way. There are fundamentals that the brand has, and I must be able to, as a customer, as a consumer, I must be able to feel that whether I'm online or I'm offline, you know. I wanted to talk about your AI your AI baby of the year campaign. Oh
Okay,
my
I
goodness.
thought that I thought it was quite an interesting one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious, like, um, so are you able to talk about like, sort of like how the campaign came to be? Sort of like what, like the whole creative process in that whole experience. Are you able to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, it was almost 2 years ago now, so it's quite a while ago. We've done so many more amazing things since then. But it if we didn't use AI babies, let's just start there. I would never use
Yeah,
AI models or
yeah,
babies or people in any of my advertising because
yeah,
we're an authentic brand, right? We want to show authentic South Africans in their natural habitat. With regards to this one, it was a play on AI. So
yeah.
it was a play on artificial intelligence, but it was Ackermans intelligence because these
That's
babies were
fantastic.
super cute. And it was about engaging between a baby and an adult. And you have kids, right? We
Yeah,
don't know what they want half of the time. They are
absolutely.
either screaming or they're looking at you in a funny way. If they're babies, they can't really communicate well if they're under like 1 or 2.
No worries.
Uh, we don't really know what they're communicating half of the time, especially if they're babies. So we wanted to turn the camera on them, have an adult conversation with these babies, and showcase that these babies actually know what they want. And then we had our our interviewer, if you want to call him that, who engaged with these babies, and I think he had a stressful time. Let's put it that way. But we love being a charming brand. I mean, we're SA's number one kids retailer. Being SA's number one kids retailer means that the front and the face of our brand is all about kids. Yes, obviously we're catering to moms, but the kids is who our joy is, right? Every parent, I think, wants better for their kids. Every parent wants their kids to be happy, to be safe, to be looking beautiful, and to just be able to be who they are and be authentically who they are. So we have a fun time as a marketing department having lots and lots of kids in our advertising because they are the most fun little humans and they are characters. Let me tell you that.
Fantastic. It's just a fun, it's just very refreshing to watch anytime I come across the video or someone cites it as a case study in the category. So let's now go to the real AI, artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
and and I also noticed that you were very quick to say that these babies were not AI generated, um, so but I'm interested in getting your take on when it comes to artificial intelligence and how sort of like what role, at least from your perspective within your team, and maybe sort of like your long-term goals or whatever, what role do you see AI playing in that, if at all is playing any role, or how do you intend to leverage AI to do the things that you want to do, if so be the case?
I think we're just touching the surface of AI, even though it's been around for I think 3 or 4 years in its current form. We as an organization, we want to take it more seriously, and from a marketing department point of view, we have quite a few courses coming up for especially my design team, my copyright team, my content team, because I think what AI can facilitate is excellent quality work at speed, right? Not having to add lots and lots of extra hours onto doing one job when you'd be able to create, let's, as an example, say lots of creative assets in a shorter amount of time. Therefore, the individuals that we do have in the department could spend more time on more strategic things like thinking about how their department operates, what more things can we do as a brand, how can we explore new things as a brand. So I think the mundane AI definitely is a tool that could help with the mundane, but give us more time to be more strategic and not be bogged down with those kinds of tasks that I believe could be automated to a certain degree.
Interesting. I think that, and I do agree with you that we are in that phase of more of from a productivity standpoint. And even though there's a lot being said about, moving from productivity to more sort of like agentic workflows and things like that, I think that there's still a vast opportunity, within that sort of, helping to do work better in terms of efficiency, productivity, and things like that. So I think the other conversation I wanted to have with you is a leadership conversation. You've been in leadership for, a while now, and I say a while respectfully. You've been in leadership for a long time. Anyway, and I know that in terms of the roles you've played, and I read this in your LinkedIn bio as well, in terms of the role you've played in launching women in leadership programs, at your former company where you'd worked in the past and things like that. I'm just curious to ask, like, when you look at what you were doing then and you look at 2026, what sort of structural, glass ceilings, if I put it that way, still exist within African marketing leadership, or just leadership broadly speaking, whether it's politics or corporate or whatever. And then on the back of that is, how do you then ensure that there's purpose, true purpose, not purpose washing in that sense. True purpose still exists, even in that context, in the context of trying to address these glass ceilings that exist within marketing leadership or broader leadership across sectors. What do you think? What sort of structural challenges still exist, and how do you think that being purpose driven can truly have an impact on this conversation?
So I was very lucky to work for organizations where, as a woman, there were no glass ceilings. However, what I have experienced as a woman in general living in South Africa is that there is definitely a motherhood penalty, because the higher up in your career that you do go, the more you start to travel, the more you are expected to be at certain dinners or events, and that takes away from your family, that takes away from your kids. And I guess it's a double-edged sword, because there is sometimes an expectation that you will just be there, and then when you are there, there's this sense of guilt that moms, I think, we innately just have. I believe that it's important to choose organizations that understand that they have moms working in the organization and they respect that, because I've been very lucky to be able to work for organizations that do respect that, where it hasn't been a penalty for me, where I'm able to run away and go to my kids' school concerts in the middle of the day, or if my son is running in a sports tournament. Because at the end of the day, all of us have mothers, had mothers. We understand what the role of mothers are. And that's the same thing for dads, right? I think it's important as women, though, that we're not as tough on ourselves, because we sometimes hold ourselves to a certain standard where we can do absolutely everything, and it's okay to say no. And that's something that I think a lot of us have to learn, because nothing was given to us very easily, and we have to work extremely hard for the roles that we currently have or the successes that we achieve, that it's okay to sometimes say no and take care of yourself and your family first, because a career will always be there. And so that's not only from a marketing point of view. I think that's just as a female living in South Africa, something that I believe that a lot of us struggle with, you know?
Amazing. It's okay to say no. You know,
Yeah, it's
I
okay.
think that's what you're leaving me with. Yeah, and I say that I think this is the first thing I say to my wife when I see her today. Is that it's okay to say no. You know,
And she'll
it's
say
okay.
no.
I should say no, right? Oh my God. Still on this sort of like the humanity side of the work that you do. I wanted to ask a question about when you operate in markets where, digital literacy isn't great, especially for someone like you who's worked across multiple markets. When you work in a market where digital literacy isn't as, mainstream, yet maybe the service you deliver is some sort of like high tech service. And I guess I can't help but ask, like, how do you balance when you have to deal in markets where digital literacy isn't as mainstream? How do you balance the need for a high tech platform with sort of the high touch human need for trust and safety in certain sectors, especially when you think about things like financial services or any other sector, by the way. But how do you balance in a market where digital literacy isn't as mainstream? I mean, it doesn't have to be across countries; it might be across cities. How do you balance your high tech versus the high touch?
It takes me back to my time at a certain fintech, which is one of the top remittance companies in Africa. And working across markets is always very tricky because you have different demographics, different penetration of technology, as an example. But one thing that I think WhatsApp kind of did was democratize the technology in I think on the globe, but specifically from a continental point of view within Africa, because WhatsApp is the one channel that is very highly penetrated within Africa. And that was the channel that, from a simple point of view, people were already using. So what is the technology they already use every single day? That's where you should start. And once you understand what that is, it's easy to be able to offer a service through that channel, which is why fintech exists at the end of the day. It's financial technology. It's not the old version of banking where everything had to be done back in the day in, let's say, at an ATM or at an actual bank branch between 9 and 3 p.m., 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. You're democratizing technology through the likes of WhatsApp, where you can create a service, add a service, offer a service in a way that's innate to the consumer, because the consumer already uses this channel. It's not a channel I need to learn about. It's not an app that I need to download. It's already on my phone. But there are other channels as well through USSD, which is still very prevalent within South Africa, I can speak of, within the South African consumer space. USSD is still very much used, and they were started by the telcos many, many years ago. And so that's something that retailers like us also use. But in the fintech space, it was definitely a tough task to understand which consumer to market which channel to. But once you understand let's say, the penetration of WhatsApp in this situation within Africa, across the various African countries, if I'm thinking about the fintech I used to work for, that was the one channel, and still today is one of the top performing channels within that business, from what I understand.
So we're talking before we hit record. We're talking before we hit record, and you said that you worked as a receptionist.
Yep,
Okay.
I did.
So sometimes, when you listen to this kind of conversations, and I always like to reference other CMOs I've spoken to, and I'm going to reference or business leaders I've spoken to. I'm going to reference Don Rowlands, who worked as a waitress as well at some point.
Yep.
I mean, I think it's really remarkable, like when you come from that to building the type of career that you've built. I think it's amazing. I think it's absolutely amazing. And I cannot help but ask, how do you think that experience, how do you think it shaped you into, or should I say, like, how do you think it shaped you? And also, can you draw any kind of similarities between working as a receptionist and having to deal with, a boardroom of executives? Like, how did it shape you? Are there any similarities in terms of learnings you took from that experience into the senior roles?
So funny thing, so Dawn Rowlands is now the CEO, I think, of Kara, Aegis Media.
Yeah,
right?
Densu.
Densu, yeah. So I was a media assistant at Kara, which is now Densu. That was just before she became CEO. So I know of her very, very well.
Interesting.
I initially, after school, went and studied law. Given what I've told you about my dad coming from not a lot of means, for me to be able to study law was a massive thing. After about a year, I realized I absolutely hated law. It was not for me. And my father said, well, congratulations, you've just entered into the unemployment world, because if you want to continue studying, you're going to have to pay for it yourself. And I had to find a job. And the only thing I could rely on was not necessarily, I had no skills. I didn't have tertiary education, but I had a little bit of a personality. And so getting the job was totally based on personality, eagerness, willingness. I started as a receptionist and admin assistant in it was a company that made wooden doors. So they made wooden doors, and it was so fun. And then I went to study at night. Every single night I studied to be able to get my qualification. So it was a lot of hard work. So if I was to draw similarities between being a receptionist to what I do today, is that hard work really, really pays off. A smile on your face is so important. So, I mean, we were chatting offline about smiling and with can
Yeah,
people smile
yeah,
to me or
yeah,
not. I just think being personable, because if people walk into my office or if I meet somebody for the first time, be nice, be kind, you know? And so drawing that similarity, because when you're the receptionist, you are the face of the brand, you're the face of the business because you're the first person that people see when they walk in. And if I draw a similarity to marketing, you're the face of the brand in every opportunity that you have. Whether you're walking in the cafeteria, whether you're in a store and you're speaking to one of the individuals who work in the store, or whether you're in the street and you meet somebody for the first time and they find out that you work for Ackermans, or they find out that I work for Ackermans, it's all about the approach. It's all about whether you have that smile on your face and you just make people feel a little bit more comfortable being in your space.
amazing,
So huge
amazing.
similarities, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't, I wouldn't have thought about it the way you just described it in terms of, you're the face of the brand in that sense. You're the first person that people encounter in the same way you're the face of the brand by virtue of the role that you play. So I want to read, I want to read a quote to you. You know the quote I'm about to read. I think that, and the reason I want to read it is because I think I've seen it maybe once or twice, in my lifetime. But when I was doing research for this, and I came across the quote again, and I read it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to read this during the podcast, because I think that the audience also needs to hear it, so we don't rob them of this incredible quote, and I'll try to do justice to it as I read it. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. So that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. I think that this is an incredible quote. And when I was reading it, I couldn't help myself but ask you. I couldn't help myself but ask you, in what moments in your career, maybe more recently in your role here at Ackermans, has this quote been very relevant to your experience? If I put it, in the way I wrote it down in my notes here, in what moments have you chosen courage over comfort? In what moments have you, sort of bit the bullet in that sense? In what moments have you, despite, knowing like this is the challenge that lies ahead of this goal, we're going to do it anyway? What are some of those moments and how do they play out?
I was very lucky to be a very young executive, which it comes with luck and also comes with a little bit of being, it's a little bit daunting as well. So I was 32, 33 when I was an executive for the first time within the fintech space, and now I'm obviously an executive within a retail space. And what comes with that is innately imposter syndrome, right? That I think follows you around always, no matter what role you have. From being a receptionist, am I answering the phone in the best manner that I possibly could, to every promotion that I've had, to the roles that I've had of late. Imposter syndrome is always one of those things. And so that quote really means a lot to me when I'm sitting there and I'm like, you should say something because what you have to say is valuable. And everybody around the table at the end of the day is just human. And what is the worst that could happen? So that's the narrative that I tell myself in those moments where it's a little bit stressful, or you're having a debate with somebody that's maybe been in an organization for longer than you, or you believe that they know a little bit more than you because they've been in the industry for longer than you. Your voice still matters. My voice still matters. No matter what room I go in, my voice still matters. And that quote rings true to me in that sense. And there was another version of the quote that I heard, I think it was a few months ago, where, and I'm going to butcher it, so I apologize, but it's leaving your home to go on a journey and returning back to your home. That's not failure. That just means that you've gone on a journey and you haven't just stayed behind, You haven't just
True.
stayed behind closed doors.
Yeah.
Because journeying and coming back to your starting point is not a failure at all. So trying something is always better than doing nothing. And so I always try to have my voice be heard, make a comment, involve myself in certain things, even when it's a little bit stressful or it's a little bit scary, because being scared means that I'm challenging myself and I want to be scared for the rest of my life. I don't want to be comfortable, because being comfortable means that I'm not learning anything and I'm not challenging myself enough.
The more we talk, the more, and I haven't felt this the way I, in talking to sort of like other CMOs or whatever, is that the more we talk, the more I think the more obvious it is to me that I think courage played a very critical part in your journey. It appears that almost at every pivotal moment, if you didn't walk in with courage, you probably wouldn't have taken the step. And this might sound, cringe, but this might sound cringe, but I think that, if we have a lot more leaders who are as courageous, to take the step regardless of the impending, challenge or quote unquote danger or whatever, as long as we know that this is the road we need to travel. I think that not just in the, I think it will reflect not just in the quality of work that we do as marketers or business leaders. I think it will also reflect like in the broader society. So I think that, and when I'm having these conversations, I always think about post production as well, right? And I think that, that courage is going to, be something, an anchor word of virtue that I'm going to, sort of describe you by, and I think
Wow.
it's very apt,
Thank you.
just based on listening to you, getting a better understanding of your journey and those pivotal moments in your career. So, I think that you've done remarkably well. I think that you should be absolutely proud of what you've done. I think that your it would have been a great story if you had your achievements and you didn't need to be courageous. It would still have been a great story and a great example for your kids and so on and so forth. But that you did these things, regardless of the fear or the sort of like systemic structural challenges or whatever it may be. I think it's really remarkable. And by the way, I warned you earlier. It was could probably sound cringe. So,
Thank you. No, I
so
appreciate that.
yeah. So I just wanted to say that as we start to wind this down now, I wanted to talk to you more about, when you look at sort of where a conversation or the conversation about taking the African narrative to a global stage without losing its local essence. I think, and this becomes even more interesting, especially on the back of, I know that, I know that. the lorries just put out, the rankings and all this great stuff. And I think I wanted to ask this question because there's always that conversation about taking the African narrative to global stages. And I wanted to get your take on that because, I think that you have done a few things in where, you've had to champion brands on global platforms and things like that. How do you do that without losing, the local essence of what Africa represents?
Why would you want to lose what we represent? We are a vibrant, energetic nation. That we are so special. And once you travel outside of Africa, you realize how much more special you are when you return.
Absolutely.
You know, I've been very blessed to be one of the first, and I'm not even sure if I was the first. We were the first brand or one of the first, but to sign a Premier League sleeve sponsorship with Mukuru. Absolutely love that brand. I love Mukuru. I mean, I'm still a Crystal Palace supporter, even though I think my son told me they're 15th on the table right now. It's okay. They won't be relegated, so that's fine. That's all that matters. And going and firstly, the thinking around this is Mukuru. Mukuru is a global organization. You're able to send remittances cross border from South Africa, from Africa into various European countries, into the UK, which was a very, very big market. It was at a phase of its brand stage at that point where awareness within the European market wasn't as well known. And then trust is always a very important thing when it comes to financial services, right? Because I'm not going to give you my money unless I trust you. So Mukuru had been around for, I think, 20 years at the time, but it's always important to continue building that trust. So what we had to do as a team was think about how do you go global, but go local at the same time. And what we did was we signed with Crystal Palace. But the reason we signed with Crystal Palace is very much around how many African players they had. So I looked at lots and lots of teams from Everton to Arsenal. At the time, Arsenal was a little bit more affordable than it is right now, but quite a few Premier League teams. And we landed on Crystal Palace, not only because it was one of those teams that didn't isolate supporters. So even if you were a Liverpool supporter, Manchester United supporter, Man City, it wasn't one of those teams where, ooh, I can't believe you support Crystal Palace. I refuse to be a part of this brand. It was a brand that was quite neutral. It was a team that was quite neutral, but they had the most African players. I think they had 6 or 7 African players. They had, I mean, I'm going to forget all the names, but Wilfred Zaha, Gueyu, Benteke, quite a few African players, and that's what made us sign Crystal Palace. So it wasn't only about let's go to the Premier League. It was about how do you ground yourself in Bristol, Africa, within the Premier League, and those were the guys that featured on our advertising. Even though they were part of the Premier League, they were our African people that were being a part of our advertising. So it's very important. Never ever lose what we represent as Africa, because that's what makes us who we are and special, and that's what makes us connect. I mean, whenever I go to the UK, I'm just like, smile at me, people, smile. Life is not that miserable. So when you come to Africa, everybody's smiling at you. So we're a special nation from a marketing point of view. That's not something that we should ever dilute for any sort of international market whatsoever.
Amazing. Love the rationale behind the Crystal Palace conversation. Absolutely love it because we see a lot of brands within the African continent, that definitely sponsor like the really big teams. I mean, and that's great, that's fine. But I think I absolutely love the rationale behind this partnership that you described, and why that was the direction the team went. That's really incredible. I think that I have just one more question, and we can call it a day. And I could keep going on and on, but I have to let you go now. And this is a question I typically like to ask, the leaders I talk to, whether marketing or business leaders. And it's a question regarding, if you were 15 years old, what advice would you give yourself, with everything you know now? with all of the experiences you've had in life, what advice would you give, the 15-year-old?
If I wanted to be a marketing director at the time of 15, the advice would be different to who I was at 15. So let's start with who I was at 15. I was going to be this hotshot lawyer at the time.
You had to say hot shot.
Hotshot, obviously. And I think I do. I don't try and be average in anything that I do. But I was going to be this hotshot lawyer, and I was going to work in corporate law, and I wanted to help big businesses, small businesses, all kinds of businesses in the legal space. Obviously, that turned out very, very differently. But what I would tell my 15-year-old self, and having just celebrated my 40th birthday, I kind of wrote a speech about what I would tell my 30-year-old self. And what I would tell my 15-year-old self is, you'll be okay. You'll do really, really well. You'll be happy. You would have made good decisions and bad decisions, but the bad decisions led you to where you are today. And then from a marketing point of view, what I would tell myself if my goal was to become a marketing director is, don't be too specialized. So what I find these days as my teams are interviewing for other team members within their teams is that marketers are very specialized. So if you want to be a marketing director, you can't be too specialized in one thing. Try and become as generalist as you possibly can, and then go into specialist field. Because once you have a generalist understanding of marketing, you can tap into every part of the marketing funnel. Whereas if you're too specialist from your first job or entry into marketing, that's where you're bound to end up. And if you want to become a marketing director, you can't just understand one thing in the marketing funnel, in the marketing field. You can't be too specialized. You need to have a full view of what marketing actually means. Marketing, advertising, creative, agency world, retail, promotions, promotional strategies, pricing, all of those things is a part of marketing. And if all you're focused on is in one area, you might be too specialized in the future. So that would be my advice if it was a 15-year-old me wanting to become a marketing director one day.
Interesting. Amazing. I think I listened to Andisa and Sabani, the Vodacom Group CMO, and he talked about this generalist, approach as well. So I think, hearing you say the same thing, obviously, brings it home and drives it home. And I completely agree. Before I say goodbye, is there something you would like to talk about, but because I'm not such a great researcher or interviewer, I didn't talk about it? Is there something you'd like to talk about, whether within your existing role or broader industry, or maybe just your favorite city to travel to for vacation, whatever it is?
And my favorite city to travel to for vacation is definitely Spain. Well, Madrid, Spain. Their favorite country is Spain. But if we circle back to marketing, and if I can give, I'm not sure what your audience profile is of your
It's
podcast.
more senior leadership, mid management to senior leadership.
Okay. Getting into an executive space is going to take more than just understanding marketing. And what I mean by that is you need to be able to market marketing within an organization, because everybody's a marketer. Everybody, for some reason, was born with amazing marketing skills. Everybody knows everything about marketing, and the kinds of opinions that you're going to get are going to frustrate you. And if you're in middle management and above, you obviously understand that already. So even the finance guys know more about marketing than you do. But what the kinds of advice that I would give is become the marketer of marketing within your organization, because once there is respect for marketing within the organization, then life is just so much easier. And that's one of the things that I think as a department we've done very, very well. I also think because we put our hand up and nothing's ever too much for us, if somebody needs help, as an example, somebody in our business needs a video for a conference that they're going to, and it's quite a senior person in the organization. We don't have time to be writing scripts or shooting or anything, but you know what? We will make the time. Because once you become an extension of the business where nobody in the organization can exist without you, in the littlest or in the biggest ways, that's when, as a marketer, you've marketed your department in a way where you're part of the ecosystem, not that expense center. You're actually the strategic center. You know, you're the one that brings strategy to life for the organization.
Thank you for bringing that up. Thank you very much. Because I think that's the life of most mid or senior level marketing professionals. In terms of everybody's a marketer, everybody has very strong thought leadership opinions about marketing.
All the time, every day.
God, thank you so much, Bronwyn. Thank you so much for coming on the Diary of a CMO. I thoroughly enjoyed having this conversation with you.
Hey, I really appreciate it. It's been so fun chatting to you.
And on that note, I want to say thank you guys for listening. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. See you at work.